Thank you so much for coming tonight to watch this presentation. I hope that is useful and interesting to you to share some of the work that I do with the nice guys. Might be a little bit different than what you guys see, but it's all, I believe it's all related. When I met Isaac through social media, I was very shocked that he actually asked me to present tonight. So thank you, Isaac, first, and to this astronomy club. So, from landscapes to nightscapes to DSO using photography. What does all that mean? This is my journey in night photography, or what we call nightscapes. And this is the image that you guys were seeing behind the title. And this is basically what I'm talking about when I refer to nightscapes. How did I get started in this photography journey that has given me a lot of really cool opportunities to meet a lot of good people? This image was taken in Death Valley National Park, and this was in 2020, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, how did I get started in night photography? Like Isaac said, I was a kid and we were always outside. We were always with my dad at the beach. Back then, I didn't realize that what he meant. They were nice guys and like observing the stars, because it's always been a part of my life, observing the stars and learning about constellations and all that through my family, my dad and my mom. So for me, the idea that some people cannot see the stars at night, I can understand that because I have all my life grown up on really dark skies. What I now know is called a dark sky. So I was always outside and by the beach. I started doing landscape photography, and this is an image of one of our mountains here in Phoenix or around the Phoenix area. It's called Four Peaks. It doesn't look like this all the time. This is just like a rare occasion where we have some snow dust, but we do get some snow around the high parts of Arizona. So I started getting more and more into landscape photography. I just did some images of lakes, mountains, Sedona, one of our lakes, and a hike that I did, combine it with the moon. But then I started looking at those images, like the one I showed you before, called Nightscapes. I started hearing about it. And what is a nightscape? So this is the image that you're seeing at Arches National Park in Utah. It is a term that was created by a photographer. You can find him online, Royce Bear. He still does workshops and classes. I just met him recently in a nightscape conference in Utah. He was really the first one to come out with this concept of nightscape, which is a combination of landscape photography and a night scene. When combined, they form what we know a nightscape. So with that term, you start finding people that are interested in this type of photography, combining the landscape with the night sky. There are multiple ways nightscapes can be done. They can be single exposures, they can be the sky tracked and blended with your foreground, or they can be composites. I'm not sure that everybody's familiar with those terms, so I'll break them down a little bit. A single exposure is just one shot image that you take at night or during the day. So it's just one photo, and that is your single exposure. The track sky and blend, I'll show you a photo, is you basically using what is known as a equatorial mount or motor that moves with the rotation of the Earth, which allows us to take photos of stars for a long period of time, more than a few seconds. So we can take photos of a star, the moon, or the sun for like 60 to 5 minutes if we want to. The motor moves with the rotation of the Earth. And then we blend our track sky with our foreground. The other way to do it is what is called a composite, which I don't really like. It is basically a foreground with a sky of different locations and different times. Some people do that and they're pretty artistic. So that is basically a nightscape. When did I start doing nightscapes? In June of 2019, I, with my friends, decided to go on this hike. It's in the Supine Reservation in the Grand Canyon. And it's a beautiful place. You need to get reservations to go. And this is a photo of the waterfalls in there. We were waiting to start our hike the night before. You need to wait at the trailhead. You cannot hike until at least 4 a.m. It's a 10-mile hike to the town. So we were outside just looking at the sky. Obviously, we couldn't sleep because we were so excited. And I saw the darkest sky ever. I grabbed my camera, which is just it was a regular DSLR with a interchangeable lens, not a night lens, just a regular lens. And I took this photo. This was my first photograph of the Milky Way. So in 2019, I had no idea what I was looking at. I mean, I looked at the Milky Way, was visible with my eyes, and I just saw a line of stars. I had no idea that this is like the north. Now that I know this is like the north part of the Milky Way, or the tail, the boring part of the Milky Way, people call it, where the core is not, it's a little bit less bright. This was my first photo, and this is how I fell in love with night photography. I said, I want to learn how to photograph. That weekend, when I was in Supai and Habasupai at the waterfalls, I did my official first nightscape. Look at that. So that was my first photo of the sky with a foreground. The stars are blurry, nothing is in focus. I was attempting some type of light painting technique, just flash a bright flashlight into the waterfall, and I just took a photo. I was so proud of my nightscape. This is the first one, but really not knowing what I was doing, this is what really got me into it. I went home and I said, I need to learn this technique. That was in June. In September, I signed up for a Nightscape workshop or a class and learn how to take the stars. And these are my first images that I took in Tucson that a couple of months after I took that other Nightscape. So this is basically what it is. So in these photos, you can see this is September, is the end of the Milky Way season. The Milky Way is vertical. In the photo on the left, there's a little light painting or some light panels. These are techniques some photographers use. This was the first time. After this day, I was in love with photography and I wanted to do it more and more. Then the COVID era hit. In 2020, that is basically the year that I learned everything about astrophotography, and I spent many nights outside because we were all working from home. So I was able to stay out late, come home, take a quick nap, and then log into work. Back then, I didn't know a lot of things. I knew there was a full moon and sometimes a crescent moon, but I didn't know about the cycles of the moon. I didn't know that the moonlight affects your photography, your stars. I didn't know exactly when the Milky Way season was, when the Milky Way is visible on the horizon. Where does it rise? Does it rise on the east or on the west? So I started learning all these things that I never actually thought about. How many degrees the Milky Way is and when it rises through the year. I didn't know that you can't see the Milky Way in the winter. You can see a part of the Milky Way, the boring part, but you can't see the core, which is like the brightest and what we want to photograph. And this image is just 45 minutes outside of Phoenix. This is just one of our skies. It's not even a dark sky, but you're able to see it 45 minutes, 30 miles from my house. So I started to learn about the different techniques to improve your photography. Like like every hobby, there's so much, right? There's so many steps that go with learning how to photograph or how to learn or get better at certain things you're doing. I started to learn there are multiple ways to capture your foreground. It could be in one shot. If you leave your exposure open for more than 30 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes, you get a really bright foreground, almost like daytime. And you can blend your night sky. That was a stacking single exposure. So these are probably 10 to 15 single shots of 10, 15 seconds each. And then I just blend them all in a software called Photoshop, and I created a more cleaner, sharper image. Then I started learning about lighting techniques. What is light painting? What is like using panels to enhance an image or some rock formation? Yeah, so all that was happening in 2020. Another technique is stacking photos and doing panoramics. Stacking photos is when you take multiple shots and put them together in the software. There are multiple softwares out there. There's one called Story Landscape Stacker. So it stacks your sky with your landscape and it gives you really pretty images, and also panoramas. So when you take panoramas, you're basically, the software is doing the work for you, stacking everything in the image. I think this is a 3 image photo. So I took them landscape mode, and then I just like stacked them, and it just gave me this basic. It's a little bit bigger, but I had to crop it for purposes of showing it to you guys today. This is also right outside of Phoenix. Another thing you can learn is how to edit your single exposures. Sometimes you don't have time to take multiple images, or you don't want to be tracking the sky because you're hiking. You can't carry all that equipment. So you take just single images. This is a tour that I did in Monument Valley, the border with Utah and Arizona. We had to do a lot of hiking in the sand. I wasn't going to bring a tracker, and it takes time to set it up. So I just had to do a single exposure. Slowly, you start learning techniques, what is good about tracking, what is good about single exposures, and how to make them or enhance those images. Star trails, it is another type of long exposure photography where you leave your camera open or shutter open for a long period of time, and you capture the movement of the rotation of the earth. Depending where you're pointing it, you can get what it already calls a circle. Depending on how much how much light is in your area, you may just see a few lines. If you're in a really dark sky, you can see multiple colors, like in this case. So this is me. This is in Arizona. There's a hidden arch in Arizona. The rule is if you go there, don't share it unless somebody's going to go and just do photographs, or it's not someone that is going to go party and trash the place. The foreground was taken first, and then I set up my camera and I did the star trails. I believe these are 200 images. And then again, you put them in the software and it does all the work for you, like how to create those circles and movements of the stars. Does anybody have any questions so far? You can ask me if you have any questions. So why Nightscapes? I'm pretty sure we all live a really hectic life. I have a job that is really stressful. Most people have jobs that are stressful. But the beauty about Nightscapes is that they really make you, like it put in here, make you seek really beautiful landscapes for your next composition. They push you to be out of the city, out of your comfort zone, and find interesting locations. It also becomes exciting to seek the best next composition for your photo. That could be rock formations, arches, historic sites, lakes with reflection of the stars in the water. It makes you want to visit national parks because usually that's where all our dark skies are. But you find yourself immersed in nature. When you're out there, it's just you and the stars and your camera. It's a way to relax your mind from the stress of the week or the day. You find yourself in your own thoughts and ideas. Sometimes we don't make enough time to do that. This forces me to take some time to myself and just be quiet in a nice, quiet place, listening to nature. You also may see some weird things in the sky that you don't know what they are. Some people may never see. I remember I saw some kind of explosion in space, and it just disappeared. I don't know what it was. I will never know probably, but that was really cool. I was like, what is that? Interesting things. And it also awakens your senses. You start seeing in the dark. You start being more aware of what's around you. You're really not scared. I mean, like, look at me. If you can see in the photo, that it's me, that I was at Oregon Pipe National Monument, just south in the border with Mexico, here in Arizona. It's a very dark sky. I was just sitting on the ground. I was looking, I don't know what I was looking at, but I have two cameras running. I was just tired and I sat down. One of the cameras captured me. So I thought it was interesting because there's scorpions and snakes, especially in the summer. So I really didn't care at that point. I live in the Southwest. I am very fortunate that I have really dark skies within a few minutes from my home. That might not be possible for people that live in areas like you. I mean, I'm not very familiar with the area that you live. I do have family in Long Island, and I do know that there is the ocean, and looking towards the ocean is always going to be dark. There's going to be reflection behind you, but you can get some really good images. But what are the limitations of nightscapes? We're talking about light pollution. That's a factor that is going to wash out our stars and our night sky. If you live in highly polluted skies, nightscapes may be almost impossible to achieve, or you may have to travel hours to find a dark sky, or maybe take a plane. You can just drive 40 minutes, 30 minutes and find something that is relatively good. You're also far away from home. Typically, you're going to be away from the city and you're exposed to the elements. You're exposed to the cold weather. You're exposed to wildlife, animals. For me, scorpions, snakes. And I'm sure you guys have them too, but coyotes, javelinas, bobcats. Fortunately, I've never had an incident, but almost. You're out in the cold and you're also in the heat. Here in Arizona and in the Southwest, you can be out at 1 in the morning and it's 100 degrees outside in the summer. So it's hot, there's mosquitoes. I found out that I don't know if it is the adrenaline of trying to get my photography, my shots. I don't get tired, I don't get scared. This is something that I do and I love doing. The other thing is that you are going to find yourself most of the times alone. I personally like to do photography by myself because I don't like to be limited to somebody else's schedule. If I want to stay a little bit longer, I can just do that. I like to drive my own car because I have all my equipment there all the time. So, but not everybody, and there's going to be a very few people that are going to share that passion. It's great that you guys are in the club. So all of you guys share that passion for the universe and the stars, but not everybody's going to want to do photography at 2, 3 in the morning in the spring to capture the Milky Way. People are going to tell you you're crazy and they're not going to know all the work that went behind an image. For this one that is on the screen, this is at Bisty Badlands. It's in New Mexico. I drove 6 hours and then to go into this place, plus a lot of hiking. This is called the Mushroom Rock. I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the United States with the rock formations they have there. Some of my work, and I'll just show you some of this that I've done. This is at the Valley of Gods in Utah. This is some of the things that I'm talking about. The colors in the sky are not colors that I put in there. This is called air glow. Isaac could probably explain it better than I can, why it's created, but you can see these things in really dark skies. It's beautiful. When you take an image, you can see these colors. You see green, you see pink, you see red. It's almost like aurora, but it's not aurora. This is another beautiful location in Utah. This is in Sedona, which is just a couple of hours from my house. Sedona is a great place where a lot of people come for night photography also. It has beautiful rock formations. There's Bell Rock in there on the left. So this is just a few hours. I go take photos, I drive back home. This is just outside of Phoenix. It's in Gila Bend. This is just really some old train station that is left. And I just drove there by myself. I went in that little hut and I was like so scared because I didn't know if there were snakes in there or there was glass or spiders. I put a light in there, ran out, and I started taking photos with the Milky Way in the back. So that is some of the things that you do when you're trying to enhance your photos. This is in Canyonlands in Utah. There's a beautiful canyon on the other side, but I was only able to capture the Milky Way because of the time of the year that I went in this direction. Again, just amazing places around me. This is a photo that I'm really proud of. This is in Arches National Park, and this is called Delegate Arch. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, have seen this arch. People don't know what goes behind an image. The hike to this place is brutal. It is a long hike. There's a lot of climbing to do, like very steep hiking. And when you're carrying your equipment, you're carrying two cameras, you're on a tripod, but you're excited. We were going to this location and people were coming back because it's night. That's one of the things I really love about night photography. When everybody's leaving, you're just getting there. You don't have crowds. That night we did have a few photographers there, but it's people that have that passion for photography. Besides the hike, this place is located in a really interesting rock formation that if you drop something, you will probably never get it back because you can't hike down there, at least not at night. And if you fall, you're going to hurt yourself because it's a pretty long fall. I went up there, my legs were shaking. There's a huge cliff behind it, but I got this shot. This had been my dream shot to wait for the Milky Way to be right behind the arch. And I got my silhouette there. On the way back, we got lost. So that was another story. We couldn't find the trail. So, okay, so what equipment do I use for nightscapes or night photography? Anyone can do night photography with a regular DSLR or a mirrorless camera. And that's just basically the type of camera that you're using. One has a mirror to do the photography and the other doesn't. The mirrorless cameras are newer and they're both digital. So you don't shoot on film anymore, but there's some people do shoot on film. But you need to have interchangeable lenses. Some of those lenses are very expensive depending on the type that you get. Some of them are very affordable for people that want to start trying. You need a wide angle lens to capture as much, and a lens that can have a really wide aperture to capture the most light at night. Think of the aperture as the pupil in your eye. When it's dark, it really expands, right? It gets really big. That's what your camera does. You want to open that aperture as much as you can to capture as much light. You also need a really good tripod because you cannot have any movement when you're taking photos. It's happened that I just kicked my tripod and my photo is ruined. I'll have to start it again. But you need a tripod. And then the photo on the right is what is known as a tracker that I've been talking about. It's basically a motor that moves with the rotation of the Earth. You set up your camera on top, and then you can take long exposures for up to 5 minutes without trailing. This image was taken during the annular solar eclipse, also in Valley of the Gods in Utah. I made my own solar filter with some cardboard and the film that I needed, and it worked out really well. How did I enter the world of DSO or deep sky objects? When I started tracking the sky, this is at Death Valley, I started noticing colors and different bright stars. If you can find Orion in there, Orion's belt, the Orion Nebula is in there. It's a little overexposed, but it's in there. So I started wondering, how can I photograph those nebulas? Started learning about nebulas at that point. I used my tracker and a zoom lens that was not a night photography lens, but I said, I'm going to try it. This was my first images with my camera, a tracker, and just a zoom lens. My first one was Pleiades or M45. I used my mirrorless camera and my zoom lens. I took multiple single exposures of Pleiades and stacked them in Photoshop. I was so proud of this image. I cannot believe that I could see this in the back of my camera. This was the first one. The next one was the Rosette Nebula or Caldwell 49. To me, this is one of the most beautiful images I had taken, and I was so proud of it. But if you look really close, there's a lot of noise. There's not a lot of definition on the nebula, but it is possible to achieve it, to take these images. The next one, my Rho Ophiuchi. People pronounce it different, but I think it's Ophiuchi. I just call it Rho. This is the first Rho, and Rho is found in the constellation of Sagittarius, which you would always find it when you're taking your image of the Milky Way. It will be always to the right of the Milky Way, unless you're in the south pole or in the south hemisphere. So this is a really terrible image, but I was in love with it. I started to learn how to do it better. I wanted to improve. I had my limitations with just a standard camera, tripod, and a non-photography lens. The other limitation was finding objects in the sky. I had to rely on apps like Stellarium or Skyview to find it and then try to zoom in around the sky to see where it's at. It was really, really difficult. So it became really frustrating for me. This is my new Rho. This was also just taken with my camera. I bought a Astro lens, so that we call it an Astro lens. This is a 135 millimeter lens with an aperture of 2.0. So it is a wide aperture lens. I took multiple images or stacked in Photoshop. You can see more definition of the nebula in this photo. Your phones are always listening. Things pop up in my social media, and there were images of the night sky. So I decided it was time for me to do the jump and purchase something that will help me capture better images. So I purchased an Astro rig that we call it. It comes with a cool camera, Astro dedicated camera. I saw one of my photographer friends using his rig during a photo session, and I fell in love with what he was doing. I had no idea till today. I have very little idea of what I'm doing, but I didn't know what I was buying. I didn't know that I needed all these parts. I needed a electronic focuser. I needed a computer. I needed a camera, the telescope, a tracking scope, a tracking camera. It's not just point and shoot. I needed a bigger equatorial mount, which is the one they have at the bottom. And my friend who does deep sky photography, he said, deep sky photography is really lazy photography because you just tell the computer where you want your telescope to go and it goes there and then you start imaging. With Nightscapes, you have to drive there, hike, find your location, try different things. People that start with deep sky photography sometimes want to try Nightscapes, and people like me that try Nightscapes, we do the jump to DSO photography. So I got this equipment, and then I took my first image with my telescope, and it's the Heart Nebula, and I was so happy of this image. I can't even remember how many images I took. I think it was 100. But it wasn't easy. I had to learn that it's not just a single exposure. Now I have to do calibration shots, which is the lights, darks, flats, and dark flats. And then you have to learn how to use a new software that is going to blend all that data. And then after that, you have to still work on that image to bring it to life. This took me a little while, but this is what came out. My next one is my favorite, like I said, is Pleiades. This is Pleiades with my telescope versus the other one I had showed you previously. This is not the best Pleiades, and I hope that I can get a lot better. I had some difficulties in the post-processing, but once I learn the software, I'm sure that it will get better, just like my first Nightscape versus the newer ones I've taken. Then I started to combine DSO with landscape or nightscape. So this is just something fun that I came up with. You have RAW in the desert. You can do a lot with both of photography. And then just 2 days ago, I captured this close-up photo of the comet C2023. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it. It's in everybody's Instagram and Facebook. This was 30, 60 seconds images of the comet and in with my telescope. And then I stacked them in another software, PixInsight. And this is what I came up with. I'm slowly learning the process, but I'm always jumping from one thing to the other. I think that both of them have room for improvement and both can give you different levels of satisfaction. I hope that some of you get interested in maybe doing some nightscapes. Maybe, I don't know how many of you do DSO photography or imaging. This is my passion that I do now, aside from my job. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this presentation interesting. If not interesting, at least you like my photos. This is my email. You're welcome to contact me if you have any questions. If you ever come here to the Southwest and want to take photos, let me know. I can always tell you where to go. And if I'm free that weekend, I could meet you and shoot images with you. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but thank you so much for your time.
Were there any instances where you were afraid, Edith, as you were hiking to these places and taking pictures?
Yes, they've been several. If you guys remember the image with the windmill, I was setting up and I just heard some movements. I always have a flashlight. Here in the Southwest, you can walk around armed, so I'm always armed. I turn around and I see some eyeballs. When I flashed my light, there was a pack of javelinas. I don't know if everybody knows what they are. They're like pigs and they can be very aggressive. So I just slowly got back in my Jeep, shut the door and waited for them to leave. Thankfully, that's the closest that I've been to something, but I'm usually very aware of where I am and what's going on around me. But yeah, it can be a little scary to be out there by yourself.
Are you on social?
Yes. Yes. So my Instagram handle is like you see in the email is AZ for Arizona and then honeybee. Not photography, but just AZ Honeybee. I think Isaac is going to share a link with my information. I also have same name, AZ Honeybee Photography on Facebook. I just like started a page for people that don't have Instagram. You can go there and see my photos and contact me if you have any questions.
I'll have it up on the screen. Yeah.
Basically, make sure that I understood the question is, you asked me if I have to have a special equipment, like hiking equipment, and if it's dangerous where I go. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, in this photo, I am wearing hiking boots. I make sure that every time I am outside, even if it is just outside of the city, I'm wearing like high ankle, like hiking boots, water repellent, because they're usually thicker. And I will also wool socks because they don't make your feet sweat. And I wear leggings because they protect your legs from insects or brush and all that. Most of the times, when I go to certain locations to take photos, I go by myself, but try to stay close to my vehicle. I recently switched to a Jeep because I want to be able to get where I want to go. Before, I used to have just a sedan and I will park it and then walk a few yards to where I wanted to take photos. Now I can just drive there. I don't care what's in front of me. I'll just drive to where I want to be. Obviously, respecting nature. I'm not running any type of vegetation. Mostly, I'm referring to dirt or rocks. When I am going to places like this, even though I photos of the Grand Canyon by myself at night, you just have to be aware. You have to know the place, get there during the day, scout the place, see where you're going to shoot, where you're going to set up, and then go back at night. And if you try to find your spot at night, it can be really hard and it could be dangerous. Also, I have a camera bag that is like a backpack. One of my bags is like a big hiking pack. And then inside, you put all your equipment. They're not cheap, but they're made specifically for that, for photographers that carry equipment, and it's comfortable, sits on your hips. You can put a lot of stuff in there. I try to buy carbon fiber tripods, which are lighter. So yeah, you take water with you. I usually don't get hungry when I am taking photos at night, maybe because of the adrenaline that I have going on. I am trying to be aware, trying to just to worry about what's going on around me in my photos. I don't think about sitting down and enjoying a sandwich. I'm focused on that. Not highly dedicated hiking equipment, but just the basics and a good camera bag for sure. And water, always water. I don't know if that answered your question, but thank you.
The deep sky objects you took, like the Pleiades and the Rosette, did you have to travel to get to those spots, or were they taken from your home?
The ones with my camera or the telescope?
The ones with the Astro telescope is what we're.
Oh, well, I have an image from my home. As I keep learning this new imaging process, I know I learned that there's some filters that you can buy that reduce light pollution. And maybe that's why in areas like where you guys live, that it's a little bit more light polluted. Is so because they have the option to do it from home. And those filters can actually block the majority of the light pollution. For those images that I took, yes, one of them was in New Mexico. So it was a really dark sky. I took one of our lakes. I'm trying to remember where. There's so much going on this last month with the aurora and the comet. But I took a couple of weeks from a lake from it's like an hour and a half from my home. It is Barrel to Sky there. So I just had it running while I was taking other photos.
Yeah, we're Bortle 8 here. So my son is the astrophotographer more than I. I'm kind of the observer. But he has all kinds of filters he has to use to try and beat the pollution. Makes it really complicated.
Yeah. I have two actually, and I don't need the extreme filters, but if I wanted to do it from home, I probably could. And actually, the image of the comet, I shot it from my front yard. I shot this one from my front yard. I used that one filter for light pollution, but it's not really extreme. My telescope was under the street light. I'm very surprised that I was able to get this much data with such a bright here in the city and with the details of the comet. Maybe if I was in the darkest place would be a lot better, a lot cleaner. But yeah.
Would you please explain the stacking post process for us?
Stacking means you take your images, like your 10, 20 images that you took of your Milky Way, for instance, and you put it in a software. If you're not tracking the sky, the best option, you can email me if you want to, if you're interested. You can put them in a software called Starry Landscape Stacker or Starry Sky Stacker, depending on what you're taking the photos. I think that it used to be free. I think it's like $45 now. You upload your images to the software, and then you tell the software where the sky is, where the landscape is. It does all the mathematical calculations. It merges the bright pixels of the image with another, matches them, and puts them all together for starry landscape stacker, and then you keep your foreground intact. So it uses one foreground, and then all your 10 sky photos are combined to put them together. If you take 10 photos of the Milky Way, the first one is here and the last one is going to be here because it's moving. You don't notice that until you're taking photos, and every 30 seconds it's somewhere else. Photoshop does the same thing. Photoshop could be a little complicated. Starry landscape stacker is very simple. Photoshop, you upload your photos as layers and then just tell Photoshop to align them. It's not the best for night photography. So there's a lot of other different softwares you can use that are a little more user-friendly than Photoshop. I know how to use it at some levels, but that's usually what stacking basically means. Thanks for the question.
It's dangerous, so try to not go and take a picture on.
Every time you go outside when it's dark, you have to really be prepared because you're going to be outdoors. Know the area and notify someone that you're going to that location and when you expect to return. Those are really good things that can help you stay safe. If it's the next day you're not back, you were supposed to be back, someone can search for help or send for help. I also carry a GPS locator with an emergency button in case something happens. I can just click it and then I'll have someone responding to my location. But it could be a little dangerous and it could be a little scary, but not too bad. At least not for me.
Those are great tips, sort of like things you don't normally think about when you hear about photography, nightscapes, or anything like that. But there are those little things you do to prepare, right? So I'm happy you went into those actually.
Yeah. And also as a woman, I mean, there are women that do this, but there's not a lot of women because we have other responsibilities. We have children at home. We have to help with homeworks and all that. And sometimes if you have children and you don't have a partner that can help or not, but thankfully my kids are grown. They're 19 and 21. So, but again, as a woman, that level of danger is a little bit more enhanced than a man. I'm not saying that men don't go through dangerous situations, but again, I'm able to carry a weapon with me. I have a flashlight, I have bear spray, I have different and multiple weapons in my vehicle that I could probably use. I have a GPS tracker when I'm familiar with the area. So as long as you have a plan and you're prepared and know what you're doing, it could help you minimize or mitigate those potential dangerous situations. Let me see if I understood the question. Have I trained anywhere else than in Mexico? Yeah, well, because I like photography, I did a photography tour in Iceland. So I was able to see the aurora for the first time last year. Who will know that it was going to be here in the US this year? But yeah, I traveled to Iceland for photography only. I am planning a trip to Bolivia. There's a really beautiful place that I want to visit for photography. I did a trip to Morocco earlier this year. Unfortunately, I was not able to take night photos because of the time of the year. I couldn't really bring all my equipment, but I did a lot of landscape photos. I travel constantly to Mexico where I'm from, and I'm always photographing the ocean, the moon, and all that stuff. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions, please contact me. Isaac is going to share my information.
Yep. I'll have it. Thank you.
Thank you.